Man, out of every single Pokemon, I really love Sneasel and Psyduck the most. They're both so fun in playthroughs. Hey, check out this ship art of them even. Man, I can't wait to use both of them in my Fire Red playthrough. Who needs dreams anyway? The idea of almost every Pokemon game being split into two versions is pretty widely seen as stupid. All this effectively does is lock you out of content. Sure, it's not substantial content, but that's arguably worse, since the only new thing you get from buying and playing the whole game a second time is an insult. I won't deny that version-exclusive Pokemon definitely do foster a really unique community feel for the series, but like, we've already got trait evolutions and those are bad enough. That being said though, there are more version differences than just the exclusive Pokemon. Some of them, in fact, are pretty interesting and pretty substantial, to the point where you could argue that some versions are just flat out better than their counterparts. So let's take a look at all of them. All of the version differences that aren't the Pokemon themselves. Mostly, I do think some of the Pokemon exclusivity is interesting enough to talk about still. So interesting that it makes you want to waste more money. Starting off with red and blue. And green. And blue. And hey, what better way to start than an explanation as to why they did this in the first place? So the initial idea from Satoshi Tajiri was that there would be effectively 65,535 versions. Damn, their greed really does know no bounds, huh? With the differences not being determined by the game you bought, but rather your trainer ID. Your ID initially would have allegedly determined the Pokemon you encounter alongside changing parts of the area design? Too lofty for this thing though. Technical limitations would have made this way too hard, especially with what they were working with at the time. So for this, alongside general marketability, it was decided to just sell two versions, and the rest is history. And as for those final versions, yeah, there's just like 20 Pokemon that are version locked, a far cry from what the initial idea probably would have been. Oh, and just in case, Japanese Red and Green and Worldwide Red and Blue have the exact same version differences between them, whereas Japanese Blue is more like a third version, which we won't really be counting here. Like, yeah, no shit, Platinum's different from Diamond and Pearl, this one's actually good! Thankfully though, immediately after, Gold and Silver had one singular massive difference between them, with that taking the form of almost every single Pokemon having a completely unique sprite between Gold and Silver versions. Now, when you're just playing through the game, it is a bit tougher to actually appreciate. Like, someone who's only played Silver probably just thinks Starmie does this sometimes. But really, this is a tremendous amount of effort to put in. And hey, the Generation 2 games just so happen to have some of the best sprite work in the series already, so more of it is never a bad thing. Is that like a hot take? I mean, Gengar has literally never looked better than it does here. This even allowed lots of Pokemon to be posed super uniquely too. Like, Blastoise being set on all fours is something we haven't really seen in the games before. Though not every Pokemon gets this treatment, with Bayleaf, Spinarak, Ariados, all the unknowns, Sneasel, Swinub, and the legendary beasts only having one sprite for both versions. Aw, but come on, think of the posing potential for Unknown G! Plus, with these being the first games to have proper version mascots, the story is very marginally altered between them, with you getting either the Rainbow Wing or Silver Wing after the climax to get Ho-Oh or Lugia respectively. And hell, in the post-game you can just get the other one anyway, so... Though it is worth noting that this wasn't always planned to be the case. See, during development, Ho-Oh was the single version mascot for both games, as seen in various prototypes and the Space World demo, with Lugia just being added in there last minute, so that's probably the explanation as to why it's so half-assed. But this won't last long, because in the later games, they started putting, well, a little more thought into the version differences in terms of story. But before that, there is one weird edge case that should be mentioned. That being that the version exclusivity specifically in the Japanese and Korean versions of Gold and Silver is ever so slightly different. Specifically, the Teddy Ursa line and Phanpy line swap games compared to the international releases. Now, there is quite literally zero reason for this, but in a sense, this does mean that Japanese Gold and English Gold do have an extra version difference. Man, now they're selling 4 versions of a game, their greed never ends! Okay, now back to the whole story-changing thing, Ruby and Sapphire. Because obviously, the entire villainous team swaps out between versions, making for the first time we've seen version-exclusive characters. Well, kinda. And this is definitely a concept that they expand on more later. Ruby's villains are Team Magma, with their plan being to awaken Groudon to expand the landmass of the world. Whereas in Sapphire, you're going against Team Aqua, with their plan to awaken Kyogre to flood the world. Now, in each game, the opposite team is still there, but you're instead kinda working alongside them. It's still an early Pokemon story though, so it's not like much happens there. And that's really as far as the differences end up going. The plot beats end up playing out the exact same way in every instance. Though with the whole team swap, you do end up fighting different trainers with unique teams between them. Still nothing major, really just the Numble line swapping out for Carvana, and even then, Team Aqua doesn't use a single Water-type move on their team, so do you think even they knew what their goal was? Another interesting thing that's worth noting is that this is our first case of seeing, or rather hearing, version-exclusive music. Yeah, during the climax, once Groudon or Kyogre gets set off, the region becomes blanketed in either a drought or heavy rain, each playing their respective songs, Drought and Heavy Rain. They're both 100% entirely unique, making for totally distinct vibes. Aw, hell yeah, what a banger! But actually, that's still not all. Yeah, Ruby and Sapphire really started upping the ante quickly, with some pretty weird version differences found in wild Pokemon encounter tables. And yeah, they're really bizarre. This isn't even in regards to version-exclusive Pokemon either. The most well-known example of these weird different encounter tables is probably in Jagged Pass, where in Ruby version, all the Pokemon range from levels 18 to 20. Meanwhile in Sapphire, all the available Mons are the same, but their levels now range from 20 to 22. That's a 2-level jump, so technically speaking, Ruby is slightly easier than Sapphire, though there is one more area that's like this, kinda. So on Route 129 and Route 129 only, yeah, see this super distinct layout? You have a 1% chance to encounter a full-on Wailord in the wild. And in specifically Ruby version, it can range from levels 35 to 40. Whereas in Sapphire, it's a much more humble 25 to 30, way more in line with the other Pokemon in that area. Ah, I see, so technically Ruby has a 1% chance to completely f you over. That balances out the difficulty, right? And finally, there technically is one more version difference that's kind of accidental. In the entirety of the Hoenn region, there's only one Moonstone, found as an overworld item in Meteor Falls. Now, this isn't anything crazy. Lots of evolution stones, especially earlier in the franchise, were super limited and rare to get. But in these games specifically, there is a bit more of a special case to that limitedness. Despite there only being one Moonstone, there are 2 Pokemon in the regional decks that need one to evolve, effectively forcing you to choose between Wigglytuff and Delcatty, in the sense that you will need to trade for the other one to complete your decks. That is, unless you happen to find a Lunatone in the wild. These guys have a 5% chance to be holding a Moonstone, so great, now you can get both evolutions. Except no! Wild Lunatone are only found in Sapphire, whereas in Ruby you can find Solrock holding a Sunstone. Meanwhile, there's only one Sunstone evolution in the dex in Blossom, which you can just get anyway since there's a Sunstone found at the Moss Deep Space Center. So technically, Sapphire allows you to complete more of the Pokédex on your own, with one extra entry. Okay, yeah, buying it again was worth it then. Fire Red and Leaf Green, being more or less one-to-one remakes of Red and Blue, don't have any super major differences, but they do introduce one strange edge case that does appear a little bit more in the future. The amount of version-exclusive Pokemon in these games is uneven, just by one singular Pokemon, but still. These remakes introduced the Sevi Islands, which were mainly just there to house lots of the Johtomons, since they weren't really obtainable in Generation 3 games any other way. The important bit about that, though, is that one of those Johtomons, Meryl, had a pre-evolution introduced in Generation 3. So in Leaf Green, you essentially get Azurill as a little bonus, filling up another extra slot in your Pokédex. The slot machines are a different color between Fire Red and Leaf Green. I don't really know how to expand on that at all, that's just a thing that happens. Do you think any of these are actually, like, going to change someone's mind on what version they're gonna buy or something? Oh my god, Azurill! Now, this next one is incredibly bizarre, because it's a version difference that involves Fire Red and Leaf Green and Emerald. Hear me out. Deoxys, pretty cool guy, was inside a meteorite once, people love him. And famously, Deoxys' main gimmick is being able to change forms, all of which specializing in different stats. So realistically, you can slot this guy into any team on any role, provided it is in the right form. Not normal though, don't use that one, it sucks. But despite how it works now with you being able to freely change its form, it wasn't always like that. Because back in Gen 3, its form was dependent on the game it was in, being completely locked to attack form in Fire Red, defense form in Leaf Green, and speed form in Emerald. Hell, the dog base form wasn't even usable unless you were playing base Ruby and Sapphire. And no, transferring it doesn't help either, as something like a defense form Deoxys from Leaf Green will become attack form in Fire Red. This was such a strange choice, since it means you're forced into using a specific strategy with this thing, based entirely around what you purchased. Well, good thing it was event only and hasn't been distributed for over 20 years, we can ignore it now. Moving on into the DS era with Diamond and Pearl. Yeah, no, there's not much here. With the story being focused around a legendary Pokemon again, we do at least have the bare minimum changes that come with that. Dialga and Palkia switch places when needed, time is swapped for space sometimes, and that's really it. In both versions, Cyrus has the exact same goal of using them to create the new world. Hell, they're so similar here that the Australian box art for Diamond erroneously calls Dialga the ruler of space, flat out confusing it for Palkia. Huh, I guess that's another win for Pearl Gang. I guess this could be considered technically adjacent to a story difference, but between the Diamond and Pearl versions, the layout of Spear Pillar is very slightly different, being mirrored for some reason. This quite literally doesn't amount to anything, but maybe it's some sort of hint to these games being in parallel universes or something? And hey, a funny thing here is that in Pokemon Legends Arceus, Spear Pillar goes with the Diamond layout, somewhat weirdly implying that that's the canon version of Sinnoh? Or rather, the Brilliant Diamond version specifically? Well, goddamn, I sure hope not. So, you know how sometimes when you find a wild Pokemon, there's a chance that they might be holding an item sometimes? Well, Diamond and Pearl are the only ever case where there are version-exclusive held item odds. Where in Diamond, Wild Elekid have a 50% chance to be holding the Electrorizer, whereas in Pearl, it's only a 5% chance. And naturally, Magby's the opposite, having a 50% chance to hold the Magmarizer in Pearl, whereas it's a 5% chance in Diamond. But a reminder, these are dual slot Pokemon, so you can only encounter them if you insert certain GBA games? Why are there layers to this exclusivity? What the hell? How deep does it go? Oh, but there actually is one really strange version difference here, surrounding Kecleon specifically. It's a version exclusive to Diamond being found through the Poke Radar in the post-game, but that's not the weird bit here. No, that comes from it being the only version exclusive Pokemon that's required to unlock one of the Poketch applications. Yeah, there's gotta be someone who cares about that, right? You need to show one to this girl in the Pal Park gate in order to get the color changing app, thus meaning it's something Pearl players need to trade to get, whereas Diamond players can just get it. Like, come on, a blue touchscreen is a privilege, not a right. HeartGold and SoulSilver, being remakes of Gold and Silver, which already didn't have that many version differences, don't have that many version differences. The concept of version-exclusive sprites is completely gone for one, which is a bit of a bummer, but also pretty understandable considering they're all animated now. Ho-Oh and Lugia do have their roles in the plot expanded from the original, so the story is changed between the games accordingly, but again, like, barely. Though it is worth noting that they do have unique battle music between them now. Here, that doesn't mean much since you can still catch both of them in either game anyway, but looking forward a little bit, specifically at Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, Ho-Oh and Lugia are used as proper version exclusives with their respective battle themes. So bam, more version-locked music, even if not quite yet. I still prefer Drought. Really, the most interesting thing about them is that these games are another example of there being an uneven amount of version-exclusive Pokemon. They carry over the exclusivity from the original Gold and Silver, and by that I mean the original. Just like the Japanese games Teddiursa's in SoulSilver and Phampi's in HeartGold, but that doesn't really matter. What does matter is that two of the Gold exclusives received new members of their evolutionary families in Generation 4, those being Gligar's evolution Gliscor and Mantine's baby form Mantike. Granted, to even get the Razorfang to evolve Gligar, you have to grind out BP at the Battle Frontier, but that's still 2 more extra Pokemon you can get compared to SoulSilver. And just like that, Lugia's right back on Fraud Watch. But literally all of that stuff up to this point? Child's play, chump change. The most interesting thing we've seen up till now was like Team Aqua and Magma, maybe, and even then they were mostly identical gameplay-wise. But come the final generation of the DS era, Pokemon Black and White, version differences finally actually become something to properly take into account. Because there's tons, and I do mean tons here. It's to the point that, via the Entralink, they even sort of canonize the different versions as being parallel worlds. Okay, so to start, the story rather obviously has its differences between versions, Reshiram and Zekrom swapping spots in every instance, obviously. And yeah, there's really not much special there. The Truth vs. Ideals theme is cool, but ultimately inconsequential. But as for the gameplay of the video game, oh boy, there's really just one that could be considered to be pretty negligible or pointless, being that the gym leader of Opelucid City swaps out between versions, being Drayden in black and Iris in white. They have the same teams though, minus the genders, so unless your strategy revolves around a track, then this changes nothing. So the first major one involves triple and rotation battles, which were introduced here in Unova. And if you somehow don't know, triple battles are exactly what they sound like, but also with the added element of you needing to take into account the range of your Pokemon's moves, since most of them can't hit opponents on the complete opposite side of the field. And as for rotation battles, oh boy. You send out 3 Pokemon at once in these too, but only the one in front attacks, with you or the opponent being able to, well, rotate between them at will before an attack, effectively letting you swap Pokemon and then use a move on the same turn. Plus, since you're technically not switching out, things like stat boosts stay active. So it's concerningly easy to just completely snowball with absolutely no way of being stopped. Yeah, this format wasn't very popular, and it also completely died in Sun and Moon, so hooray! The relevant part here is that between game versions, every instance of one of these battles will be replaced by the other. Triple battles being in white, whereas rotation battles are showcased in black. Each version also having one singular trainer who shows you the opposite battle type found on Marvelous Bridge. But literally all that hyping up aside, there's only like 5 of these in the entire region. But that counts for something, right? There is one kind of small version difference here that's really more just like a super neat detail. Reshiram and Zekrom actually have unique battle themes. Very slightly. The melody, instrumentation, key, all the exact same. But there is this one part here, a little break in the song that changes based on who you're fighting. Against Zekrom, you'll hear a sort of staticky, electric crackling sound. Whereas against Reshiram, that part has the blowing of fire. It's something that you really wouldn't notice unless you're listening for it, but once you do notice that detail, it really speaks to the love and care put into this song. Love and care that was completely lost in ORAS and the Ultra games, where they both just used Zekrom's version of the theme for some reason. Man. Another really unique thing that the Unova games do is actively change some areas between versions, not only aesthetically and layout-wise, but also, in some cases, functionally too. They range from small details, like Mistralton City having modern greenhouses in black, whereas it has more natural fields in white, alluding to one of the game's more subtle themes of modernity versus tradition, which is actually done to an even greater effect in the entirety of Opelucid City. Not only does it look completely different between the versions, being more rustic and worn and white compared to the borderline unfitting futuristic look black has, which also has the cool detail of the stairs being in white, almost as if the city's more integrated into the landscape compared to in black, where it's completely paved over and flat. And the cherry on top of all of that is that the music is entirely different to sell it. Like, no joke, these are completely different tracks. Here, I'll play both of them at the same time! But we can still go further. What about completely version-exclusive areas? In the post-game, you'll find either Black City or White Forest, which layout-wise are practically nothing, but in terms of purpose and usefulness, they're entirely different. So the way they work is that from the moment you start a new save file, there'll be some random NPCs in your city or forest, all of which having their own point values. And each day that you're not interacting with them, their point value will decrease. If too much time passes and that value drops to 0, they will leave. There is still a way to build the population back up though. By connecting to another player, you can go to their city or forest and recruit whatever NPCs are there. Granted, you literally cannot do this if you are alone, or God forbid, don't have 2 of the same game. But that's all irrelevant. What these NPCs do for you is what really matters. In Pokemon Black, you can just battle them. They all have 1, maybe 2 Pokemon each, all of which not being native to Unova. It's really nothing more than an extra way to get XP and money at the end of the day. Or ogle at the fact that a Gallade exists or something. On top of that though, the Black City Market can appear if you have 4 or more NPCs present, just selling rare items with the ones that appear corresponding to different people. It's not worth it at all though. Look at these prices. A normal ass Pokeball for 10,000 Pokédollars? It also lets you buy various valuable items here. Like, doesn't that defeat the entire point of valuable items? Oh, you don't understand. My competitive team relies on the Big Pearl. And as for White Forest, it's just infinitely better, like, objectively speaking. You can't fight the trainers here. Instead, each one is tied to a wild Pokemon that they essentially bring with them. So if a trainer is in your forest, you can find whatever Pokemon they're associated with in the tall grass. All of which being found nowhere else in Unova. And there are some pretty heavy hitters too, like Ralts, Bagon, Porygon. This essentially means that White, purely thanks to this one area, has a whopping 34 wild Pokemon exclusive to it, without any equivalents in Black. And that's not even counting their evolutionary lines. On top of that, remember Black City's market from like 2 seconds ago? Well, White Forest has a way to get rare items too. Except here, they're all free hidden items, with the only downside being that they don't always appear. So this is really the first instance where you can decently confidently say that one version is distinctly better than another by a somewhat notable amount. Oh, and then the sequels? Just got weird with it, honestly. The majority of Black and White 1's version changes do carry over here, like the different versions of Opelucid City and the small farming detail in Mistralton. Not all of the differences made it over though, like for example, the triple on rotation battles being focused on differently just isn't here. There are way more of each of them, and they're just scattered all across the entire region in both games, with the only difference surrounding them left being that Heartbreaker Charles himself battles you in a rotation battle on Route 5 in black, whereas it's a triple battle in white. And hell, the opposite battle is still available in the game, just in Driftvale, so you're not even missing out on anything. But there's also been way more added in those 2 years. For starters, the UI is slightly different between versions, both in the bottom screen menu and in things like the health bars or area indicators, swapping out between black or white depending on the version. Hell, this even extends to, funnily enough, the opening Welcome to the World of Pokemon sequence, so instead of standing in a white void, Juniper can stand in a black one if you want. As for the areas, Route 4, which was a pretty standard desert route previously, is now entirely different between games, showcasing some new, modern buildings in Black 2, whereas in White 2, it's old excavated ruins. And it's not just aesthetics either, the layout, save for the end of the route, is entirely different. Similarly, the completely new area, Reversal Mountain, is also completely different between the versions. In Black being a dormant volcano, damp, filled with water with a nice cool blue aesthetic. While in White, it's active, being a fire dungeon with lava in the middle and a hotter color scheme. And of course, the layout's completely different too, even directly mirroring each other in some cases. It's to the point that there are completely blocked off rooms with non-functional staircases that are purely there just to line up with the other game. And hey, as the cherry on top, they each have unique music too, because why not? Even Victory Road itself is slightly different between the games, with a couple bridges being either collapsed or rebuilt, thus letting you take slightly different routes through them. It's very, very minimal, but it's a pretty cool detail nonetheless. And last but not least in terms of areas, Black City and White Forest return, but here they've been entirely overhauled. The NPC system has been completely removed, wild Pokemon and all, and in its place there's now Black Tower and White Tree Hollow. 2 dungeons with their own gimmicks going on, but they're ultimately pretty similar to each other in functionality. You have to find the gate trainer on each floor by using hints the other trainers give you, defeat them, and then battle the boss trainer to move on to the next floor. Aside from the obvious aesthetic differences, the trainers in here are actually completely different too, which is nice. Not only do the standard trainers have a different roster of classes, but the boss trainers are all completely different. Even the final battle with Benga has him swap out his Latios and Garchomp for a Latios and Dragonite. Hell, even the super boss trainers that only appear after you've defeated Benga have a team of full legendaries that swap out entirely. Like, where the hell did they get a Cresselia from? But really, the part that most people remember, or rather are told about the Black Tower and White Tree Hollow, is that after you finish it, you're given a free shiny Pokemon, with the one you get being version exclusive. Like, yeah, of course it is, why else would I have brought it up? With them being a Gible in black and a Dratini in white. The interesting thing here, though, is that this specific reward makes for another case where one version just has more available Pokemon than the other. Dratini can be found in the wild through fishing in either version, whereas Gible just isn't anywhere else in Unova. So that's 3 more Pokédex slots that get filled in one version over the other. Ha! After White had the advantage in the first games too. How the turntables. But none of this stuff has really been weird yet. No, that would come in with the key system. This is technically a whole other can of worms, but it is directly tied to version differences, so I do kinda have to talk about it. Also because it makes me unreasonably angry. Think of it kind of like this. What if you could transfer version differences to other players? Not version exclusives, differences. By doing certain things in your game, you could unlock keys that could be given to other people, thus allowing them to enable or disable content from the opposite game. There were effectively 3 things here. You could replace Black City or White Forest with the equivalent if you wanted. It doesn't really do much for you. You can buy the opposite city's items and you can fight the other trainers in the other dungeon, but it's also not like you could get the other shiny dragon or anything. Other. You could unlock the chamber for either Registeel or Regice, letting you catch them yourself, which is actually useful, considering usually they're actually just exclusive Pokemon. And the big ones, Easy Mode and Challenge Mode, with you unlocking Easy Mode for beating White 2 and Challenge Mode for beating Black 2. So not only is locking difficulty options behind beating the game already a choice, but also making it so you can only play one of them unless a friend of yours has the opposite version and is willing to set aside like 5 minutes of their time to give you Easy Mode. Like, no, I don't want that, that's an insult! And on top of all that, these modes don't even work properly! As for Easy Mode, it lowers the levels of every trainer's Pokemon. Seems pretty simple, if not a bit lazy. But the problem is that the Pokemon's stats all remain the same as if they were their original levels. Now technically they are a tiny bit weaker since level is a factor in damage calculation, but at large you're fighting the same strength of Pokemon more or less, all while earning less EXP and prize money, so in a way it's actually slightly harder. And challenge mode is just fucked right up. Every one of every NPC's Pokemon are higher level, but again, the stats don't change, so now you're getting more EXP for fighting normal Pokemon. However, this mode does add a tiny bit more on top of that. Every gym leader and Elite Four member has an extra Pokemon in their party, which is actually nice. Rounds out their teams really well. But even further on top of that, their existing Pokemon get new movesets, plus some new strategies like added held items. So even if the Pokemon aren't really leveled up, this kind of balances out the challenge a bit more. Even if some parts clearly weren't tested. Like in Marshall's battle, his Conkeldurr has a Flame Orb in order to activate its Guts ability. Okay, pretty solid challenge there. But in his rematch, it still has the Flame Orb, but its ability is just Sheer Force, meaning it now gets burned for no reason. Or maybe it's an even more advanced strategy. Oh, yeah, and there are also some version-exclusive FunFest missions in the Entralink. I legit forgot. While the names are different between games, they're functionally the exact same as one another. Like, Black 2 has the mission Exciting Trading, whereas White has the Exhilarating Trading mission. But they're the same with different items being available. Or like Noisy Hitting Grottos and Quiet Hitting Grottos, also in Black 2, White 2 respectively. Black 2 just has Stunky, while White 2 just has Glameow. That is the only difference between these quests. I'll be so real, I've probably forgotten a bunch of other version differences too, but let's just move on. Wow, over 50% of the video up to this point has just been about the Unova games. My god. But hey, that's earned. This is the point where they really tried making the version you pick really matter. Decently substantial parts of the game end up being completely different between versions, and while the experience at large ends up being mostly the same, there are key bits that do make these journeys a little different. But like, is that really a good thing? Wait, listen, hear me out. Before, when I chose one version over another, I'd really just be missing out on a couple more mons. Sure, I cry knowing that I'll never have Cranidos, but it's really no big deal. Here, though, I feel much more like I'm actually missing out in a sense. Sure, the key system helps a bit, for as stupid as it was, but the alternate Route 4s or Reversal Mountains, and especially Black City and White Forest in Black and White 1, those are pretty major things that I would never be able to experience unless I shell out more money. It makes for a weird in-between, where more version differences justify the two separate games more, while also making both individually feel almost incomplete in a way. It's not really a huge deal though, just something interesting to consider. And Game Freak seems to have agreed, since X and Y have comparatively pitiful version differences. The usual story changes apply here, with Lysander in particular having some dialogue change, appearing generally more nihilistic in Y. Most notably, his final threat towards the party is to kill them all in Y, whereas in X, it's to make them all immortal so they can live long enough to watch the world die out, which is actually pretty metal. But he still threatens to kill literally everybody in both games anyway, so, like, doesn't matter. The ultimate weapon changes designs between the games too, which is kinda neat. Yeah, no, there is not much here. With the introduction of Mega Evolution, some Mega Stones are only obtainable in one version over another. And while that's kind of just regular version exclusivity, but with extra steps, no, that's the end of the sentence, it really is just that. Although, weirdly, a couple of the stones are kind of reversed from the versions that they should be in. Namely, the Manectite and the Houndumanite. Both found in the same spot on Route 16, but the Houndumanite is only in Y, whereas the Manectite is only in X. However, Manectric and Houndoom themselves are in the opposite versions from these. And it's not even just them, because Tyranitar and Aggron are the exact same way, with the opposite Pokemon Stone being found in the Silage City Gym. Did they even want you to use Mega Evolution in these games? Because I'm half convinced they didn't. Funnily enough though, this time around, the version-exclusive Pokemon are actually the most interesting thing here, for once. Now, for the most part, they are as standard as ever. Each version has a total of 20 Pokemon that you can't get in the other. Except no. Some of these alleged version exclusives can be found in both versions via the Friend Safari. And they're not in equal amounts either, with 6 of the X-onlys being in here compared to 11 of the Y-onlys. So ultimately, Y just has less exclusives. Because, granted, the Friend Safari is borderline impossible to use now thanks to the 3DS's servers closing, but goddammit, it's about the principle. Ruby and Sapphire's remakes, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, also don't have much. They obviously carry over the exclusive stuff they already had, like the villainous teams from the original games and all the stuff that comes with. I guess it is worth noting that in these remakes, Maxie and Archie are much more distinct characters now, plus Tabitha, Courtney, Shelly, and Matt have since become actual characters, so the whole team swap does kind of matter a bit more now, at least. And I guess it's also worth mentioning that the Pokemon you soar on, being Mega Latios or Latios, also swaps out depending on the version, so I guess that's another aesthetic thing to consider? So long as you ignore the fact that they look completely identical. I guess the most interesting bit is that this is the first game where the Sacred Ash is a version-exclusive item, acting as a one-time full-party revive, and it's only obtainable being held by the wild Ho-Oh you catch in Omega Ruby, whereas the Lugia and Sapphire doesn't have any held items, so it doesn't compare. And lo and behold, this same thing happens in the Ultra games too. What the hell is this? Compensation for the legendary that's weak to the other one? Yeah, no, there's really nothing here aside from the exclusive Pokemon. Not even the Megastones are exclusives anymore. But I guess that was really just because they were gearing up for another game with some absolutely massive differences, rivaling Unova and potentially surpassing it too, depending on what you're looking for. A key part of the plot to Pokemon Sun and Moon is the existence of Ultra Space and alternate parallel universes. So naturally, similar to Black and White, making the different versions of the games their own parallel universes in a sense was a pretty natural conclusion to come to. And for that very reason, these games do have a handful of version differences, big and small. Story changes, blah blah blah. Solgaleo swaps out with Lunala, the Sun is replaced by the Moon. There's one somewhat neat detail seen in the cutscene where all the Ultra wormholes are opening across Alola, where Hala encounters a Buzzwole in Sun or a Pheromosa in Moon, since they're exclusives. But other than that, these games are as standard as ever. Obvious story stuff aside, there's one massive difference here that's immediately noticeable. Do you see it? These games are set 12 hours apart from one another. The entire day-night cycle is reversed, which, depending on when you usually play your games, makes for a fundamentally different experience. The atmosphere of the whole region changes, obviously, and it feels like because of the time difference, a bit of extra care was given to making the different times more distinct. For starters, this is the first time since Sinnoh where some locations have had unique day-night themes. And there's even some visual flair too. Like for example, the stars in Howley City at night are a really pretty rainbow color. On top of the aesthetic things, there are the obvious gameplay ramifications too. Like, Alola is one of the few regions where the time of day actually affects the wild Pokemon you encounter. Plus, the very few time-dependent evolutions are going to play out a bit differently here too. Plus, Dust Balls. These things have a higher catch rate at night, so depending on your schedule, say if you primarily play games during the day, Moon could be considered the best version choice for you based on that alone, just constantly having that catch boost active. Though it is worth noting that in the post-game, there is a way to reverse the daylight cycle no matter the version. By bringing one of the box legendaries to the rift up at the altar of the Sun or Moon, you can travel to the reverse world, which is literally the exact same as the regular world but with the time swapped, and the altar becomes the one from the opposite version. This doesn't really do much other than enforce the idea that Sun and Moon are parallel universes to each other, but it's still a neat detail. Even if this technically means that the different times of day aren't really a version difference, but... Oh, and also the Lake of the Sun and Moon swap too, but they're functionally completely identical, so that's not really that notable of a difference now, is it? Something that is notable, though, is the fact that these games were the first to introduce version-exclusive evolutions. Not just with version-locked items or anything. There are Pokemon that have normal evolution methods, but what they evolve into is entirely based around the game they are currently in. While Rockruff evolving into its midday or midnight form is now based on time, it wasn't like that in Alola. There, it would always evolve into midday in Sun and midnight in Moon. Now, the forms themselves weren't exclusive though, since you could just find either one in the wild regardless of what you're playing. But come on, I'm attached to this Rockruff, that's my good boy! And the other one was Cosmoem into Solgaleo or Lunala, which is actually still game dependent to this day. Any Cosmog that's in Sun, Sword, or Scarlet will eventually become Solgaleo, whereas in Moon, Shield, and Violet, it'll become a Lunala. Okay, now this is just overpopulation, getting a Cosmo in here. All that time-based stuff aside, there's some more big ones here too. For one, some clothing options are exclusive. This is mainly seen in the shirt and top options, with most patterns and designs only being available in one version of the game. Plus, Sun also has 5 more hat options than Moon, while there are 5 more shoe options. I don't know why, though. Yeah, screw Whimsicott, I need those shoes! And arguably the biggest part, the colors. In Sun, you have all the hotter colors, red, yellow, orange, pink, and beige, wow, whereas Moon has green, blue, navy blue, purple, and gray. This is just like a really odd limitation to have, though. It restricts your options way more than it should, and Alola's fashion already wasn't that flexible, mainly just being t-shirts and shorts. You could get the other colors if, now listen to this, another player showed up wearing them in your festival plaza. No, that doesn't fix any of it. But hey, at least the last few differences are definitely more reasonable, if not still weird, all involving battles. The first totem Pokemon you battle swaps out between games, being a Gumshoos in Sun and an Alolan Raticate in Moon. They are very similar fights, mainly thanks to being the first ones, but since they're, different Mons with their own stats and movesets, there's enough of a distinction here. The trials themselves are the same across the board, but after completing Kyoe and Malos, there are some optional rematches with them that are, you guessed it, version locked. For no reason really, but they are, with the Kyoe rematch being in Sun and the Malo rematch being in Moon. Weirdly though, they aren't just rematches alone. Sure, the battle itself is like the only gameplay part of these, but they're actually more like proper side quests, with you starting both of them by talking to either Kiawe or Malo in their rooms, before going to either Lush Jungle to find Malo alongside her brother's Wimpod, or the Thrifty Megamart where you sit back and watch as Kiawe loses his job. That's just kind of tough. Somewhat similarly, during your first visit to Heia City, you'll bump into Dexio and Cena, and before giving you the Zygarde Cube, you'll do battle with them just for the hell of it. Dexio and Sun and Cena and Moon both with their own teams. And finally, in the post-game battle tree, each version has 3 trainers who are unique to it. Plumeria, Cena, and Kyoe can appear in Sun, while Guzma, Dexio, and Malo can appear in Moon. Oh goddammit, I bought the version without my boy! One singular side quest also changes. In Haina Desert, there's this strange bald man. And all the lore stuff aside, like how he's implied to have some relation to the 5 men who formed Mr. Bonding, that's real, by the way. In order to finish the quest, you need to show him a Solrock in Sun or a Lunatone in Moon. But the weird bit there, though, is that neither of these Pokemon are found in Alola, not even in the Ultra games. So not only is this quest requirement dependent on your version, but you also need to have another game that has one of these guys in it, while they've also very often been version-exclusive encounters. So better hope you don't have Moon and Omega Ruby, because that way you'd be boned! Oh, and one last one. Remember back in Ruby and Sapphire where, for no good reason, Jagged Pass was just harder in Sapphire? Well, that kind of thing returns here too. Twice! First up, at Blush Mountain, which is a side area with quite literally nothing to do in it, there are some wild Pokemon you can find. And only in this singular field of grass, all the Pokemon are 1 level lower in Moon when compared to Sun, ranging from levels 26 to 29 in the former, compared to 27 to 30 in the latter. Now, why is this the case? No, I'm asking, why is this the case? Even weirder, there's another patch of grass here with its own encounter table, and the levels are consistent throughout. And the second time this happens is in an innocuous little place called Mount Lanakila. Victory Road? Where in Moon, all of the Pokemon found there range from levels 42 to 45, whereas in Sun, it's 45 to 48. A whopping 3-level increase across the board. And that's not even the end of it, since there's another exception here. In the northmost field of grass at the base, all the Pokemon are levels 42 to 45 in both versions, even though all the other patches of grass in the areas have the exact same encounter table, just with a level difference though. What the fuck? So yeah, I guess technically Sun could generally be considered to be the harder game, even if only very, very slightly. Phew, it's mostly just a bunch of small to average size differences, but they kinda do add up. Especially the whole day-night cycle swap, with you being able to actively incorporate your own schedule into the decision you make here. And what if I told you that the Ultra games expanded on it further? Well, I mean, yeah, you'd probably believe me considering their upper versions and all. I'd hope they expanded on this. Quite nearly all the differences from the base games carry over here, for one. The only ones missing are the weird-ass level disparities I just talked about. Wow, these games really did butcher the original experience. Naturally, with an expanded story comes expanded story changes. And while it's, again, mostly the same throughout, there is an additional difference found in the new characters, the Ultra Recon Squad. Throughout your journey, you'll bump into a different pair along the way. Dulce and Zossie in Ultra Sun, and Soliera and Fico in Ultra Moon. The few battles you have with them are all the same, and they do fulfill mostly the same role, but their ultimate goal at the end of the day is slightly different, with the former duo wanting to stop Necrozma's rampage, while the latter are looking into how to harness Necrozma's power via the Z Crystals. And speaking of people who would harness legendary Pokemon's power, in the newly added Team Rainbow Rocket epilogue, all the team leaders you face end up having a different legendary on their team, save for Archie and Maxie. Not only being another rare case of trainers changing based on the version, but this also has the implication of your version choice also determining what versions happened in the past, really just selling the whole parallel universe thing even more. Although I know that all these guys are from different universes, that's the whole point. Look, Yowie! There's also Mina's Trial, which is completely new to the Ultra games, tasking you with going back through the entire region to collect petals from the other trial captains. And because it's Pokemon, you know there's some battles sprinkled in there too. But between Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, some of the battles are different. Like when you head to Lush Jungle, in Ultra Sun you battle Mallow, while in Ultra Moon you battle Lana. When you go to Hokalani Observatory for Sophocles, he flat out doesn't battle you in Ultra Moon, whereas he does in Ultra Sun. And then the inverse of that happens with Nanu, where he battles you in Ultra Moon, but not in Ultra Sun. Pretty pointless changes all around, but it's kinda cool, I guess. And hey, it does mean that technically all these people do get fought without it being a total slog doing 6 fights back to back. Kids these days couldn't survive Nugget Bridge. Okay, as for the more properly unique things, Ultra Warp Ride is a feature. And some of the other dimensions you can visit, namely the ones containing Buzzwole and Kartana and Pheromosa and Celesteela, are version locked. Now, these places really aren't anything huge at all. Most of them are just straight shots of the legendary with some cool visuals. But hey, all the layouts technically are different, plus there are some teeny tiny microscopic gameplay differences in a couple of them. In Kartana's Ultra Forest, only found in Ultra Sun, there's a completely new trainer class, Ultra Forest Cartonboy, who have no equivalent in Ultra Moon. There are only 2 of them, and they just use a single Kartana each, but hey, that is a difference. They even got a card in the TCG, so that's gotta count for something. Saturn from Team Galactic doesn't even have that. And conversely, in Pheromosa's Ultra Desert and Ultra Moon, there's just a really tiny strength puzzle, plus a patch of jagged terrain that you have to cross with Mudsdale. Gameplay! Okay, scaling it back a little bit, similarly to Black and White 2, the UI also changes between the games here. Though, compared to over there, where the entire battle UI and menus changed color, it's hardly used here. The bottom screen menu goes from a vibrant orange to a cool blue, if that at all affects your choice on which game to buy. Also, in line with the side quest in Hyena Desert, there's one more side quest added here with a version difference too. Though, technically, that's not even really accurate, since it's more like a completely different side quest in each game. So, in Ultra Sun on Route 14, you'll find a little girl with a sandy gas, with her explaining to you how it's unhappy being here since it's not its kind of beach. You simply end up telling her about Ula Ula Beach, you go there, and she gives you a Stardust item. Pretty simple. As for Ultra Moon though, none of this is here. Instead, on Route 15, you'll find a little kid building a sandcastle. But surprise, it was actually a Sandygast! So you do battle with it and end up receiving a Stardust afterwards anyway. Both of these quests are ultimately very small, but they both have quite a bit of personality. I just don't get why they are the only ones. Well, hold your horses, at least we have... Wait, that's it? Shoot, I thought there were way more differences. Technically, both the base and Ultra games have some exclusive ranks to the buildings in the Festival Plaza, but even then you can just obtain them by communicating with other players, and also it's the Festival Plaza, so who cares? It really does mainly circle back to the whole day-night cycle change, and how that really does shake up your experience just enough to be considered. Ultimately, the Unova games definitely do still have the most impactful differences, but Alola's nothing to scoff at. Something that I do scoff at, though, is Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Okay, depending on how you look at this, these games either have the single most important version differences, or just like pretty standard nothing ones. By that I mean, aside from the Wild exclusives as per usual, the only other changes revolve entirely around your starter. Obviously, your choice of version ends up determining whether you get Partner Pikachu or Partner Eevee, both of which being very, very different. Like, yeah, they're different Pokemon with their own types and base stat spreads, of course. And it also should be noted that these base stats are very different from regular Pikachu and Eevee, but also, for instance, signature moves. In various Pokemon centers all around the region, you can find tutors who teach some pretty powerful moves to your starter. These moves being Pikachu's Zippy Zap, an electric move with increased priority and a guaranteed critical hit, Floaty Fall, a flying type move with a chance to flinch, and finally Splishy Splash, a water type move with a chance to paralyze. And other than the admittedly cute references to flying and surfing Pikachu, these moves are honestly pretty standard. Definitely powerful, especially Zippy Zap, but these are just like your pretty standard signature moves nowadays. But Eevee, oh sweet Eevee. Instead of having 3 of these unique powerful moves, it has 8. 1 for each evolution, which is some major blue balling since you can't get 5 of them in the game, but I digress. All of these are obscene. Bouncy Bubble, a water type move that does solid damage and heals the user. Buzzy Buzz, an electric move with a guaranteed chance to paralyze. Sizzly Slide, a fire move with a guaranteed chance to burn. Glitzy Glow, a psychic move that does damage and sets up light screen. Batty Bad, the best one, being a dark move that sets up Reflect. Freezy Frost, an ice move that resets all stat changes for all Pokemon on the field. Sappy Seed, a damaging grass move that also sets up Leech Seed. And finally, Sparkly Swirl, a damaging fairy move that also cures the entire party of any status conditions they might have. Oh, yeah, it's pretty insane, and it makes Let's Go Eevee just, like, way easier. I mean, as if the game could be any easier, that is. And the only other notable difference here is in the obtainable outfits, which are somehow more unbalanced than the moves, for more or less the same reasons. Since these games don't bring the bike back, the chairman of the Pokemon fan club gives you instead outfits based on your starter Pokemon. Initially just giving you a basic Pikachu or Eevee outfit for your trainer, but once you've maxed out your partner's friendship, the chairman will now give you outfits based on all of their evolutions. For you and them. I'm sure you can see exactly where this is going. In Let's Go Pikachu, you can now receive the Raichu outfit. Pretty cool, it looks nice. In Let's Go Eevee, you get 8 outfits, all based on the evolutions. And these outfits have a lot of variety too, at least by the standard of this game's customization. All the tops have completely different patterns. Wow, now that's innovation! But yeah, I guess all of that considered, this is yet another case where one version could technically be considered the better one. Now, moving on to Sword and Shield. Yeah, there's not much here either, surprisingly. Even if on the surface it does seem to have some big differences. Even in terms of the story changes this time around, they're probably the smallest they've ever been since Kanto. Zacian and Zamazenta are both part of the story either way, and quite literally the only difference is whether you pick up the rusted sword or shield during the climax. Which, mind you, could very easily have just been a choice you make in the game, especially considering how it affects literally nothing about the sequence that follows. Plus, every instance of Zacian and Zamazenta obviously swap out too, like the one Hop uses in his final battle for instance. But they both serve quite literally the exact same role in the plot, so the story doesn't change at all. No, the most notable differences in Sword and Shield are in the gym leaders, actually. See, now this is something that's actually pretty significant and really cool. Your first case of seeing this is for your 4th badge in Stow-on Side, where in Sword you'll fight the fighting type specialist Bee, whereas in Shield there's the ghost type specialist Alistair. Then later, for your 6th badge in Sirchester, Sword has the rock type Gordy, whereas Shield has his mother and the ice type leader Melanie. They are entirely different characters with completely different backstories, lore, and teams. Now, it should be noted that the gyms themselves are the exact same in terms of gimmicks and puzzles, just with the themes being swapped out accordingly, but those aren't the focus here anyway, so shut up! With such important fights being so different between the games, you'd want to take extra care to make them comparable balance-wise though, and Sirchester's leaders do that fantastically. Gordy and Melanie both have 4 Pokemon, and they actually all share secondary types. Shuckle and Frostmoth are Bug, Barbaracle and Lapras are Water, and Colossal and Galarian Darmanitan are Fire, counting Zed mode at least. Suboptimal should be running Guerrilla Tactics. Are you sure you're a gym leader? And as for their other Pokemon, it's just the version-exclusive Stonejourner and Ice-Q respectively. Yeah, generally, Gordy and Melanie are a great way to do version-locked characters. Bee and Alistair, however... Bee does have a decently built team. Hitmontop, Pangoro, Sirfetch'd, and Machamp are nothing to scoff at, especially at the 4th gym. While Alistair has an unevolved Galarian Yamask, though to be fair, maybe he just couldn't figure out how to do it. Mimikyu, which is fine. Cursula, which already isn't that great of a Pokemon, and also only has 3 moves for some reason. And last, a Gengar, which is also fine, even though it runs Venoshock with no way of poisoning you. This weird sort of imbalance of quality extends to their lore too, as seen in their league cards, which I guess are technically another version exclusive thing in their own right. Goddamn. Melanie and Gordy fought over the gym to see who got to take it over, with the victor being version dependent. That's a really cool explanation for the difference. Bee and Alistair have no such explanation, they're just like that. But hey, at least the latter wears a piece of a dead Pokemon on his face, now that's metal! Also, in a somewhat similar vein, there's Milo. While he himself is in both versions, his ace in all of his rematches swaps out, being Flapple in Sword and Appleton in Shield. Now, this is really just because they themselves are exclusive Pokemon, but hey, it's still cool. And hey, once he G-maxes them, you can't even tell the difference. Hooray! Now, even though there is indeed not much here, this game does have one of the weirdest version differences in my opinion, that being version exclusive food. Making curry in these games uses a variety of different food items, but one of those items, or rather 2 of them I guess, are version locked, with Bob's food tin being in Sword and Bach's food tin being in Shield. So there's a couple things to analyze here. First of all being, who the fuck is Bach? But also, yes, they do make very slightly different curry. But this also means that if you ever want to complete the curry dex, you do have to trade for it. Why? It's the curry dex! Well, goddamn, now I feel bad for not buying Sword. Hey, guess what? Of all version differences to have here, the stupid level imbalance thing comes back. This time on the final route, Route 10, and also only in this one patch of grass at the very start, and also only for the hidden Pokemon in the rustling grass. They range from levels 43 to 46 in Sword, and 44 to 49 in Shield. Like, the level changes aren't even in equal amounts anymore, it's just stupid. Although, while that may be it in terms of differences in the base game, the DLC, the Sword and Shield Expansion Pass, has like 2 differences. In the Isle of Armor, your rival completely swaps out based on the game, just like those gym leaders. With Shield having the Psychic type Avery, and Sword having... having the Poison type trainer, Clara. Damn, they should make a Pokédoku about her or something. Guess what I did? Okay, yeah, like, breaking character for a moment here. Thank you so much for Pokédoku for letting me do this. But yeah, I made a Pokédoku to tie into this video. As you can see, it's a big Clara joke because you know me. And also Unova because that's the region with the most differences. And also Dragon type because... well, I don't want to spoil the answers now, do I? Anyway, yeah, you should totally play Pokédoku. It's a really fun daily game. Even if it makes me feel kind of stupid sometimes. Like, come on, Quaquaval's a fairy if I've ever seen one. Anyway, back to your regularly scheduled video. Having an entire rival be game dependent is way more interesting than the gym leaders though, simply by virtue of spending more time with them. They get far more of a chance to be completely distinct characters with depth, which Clara and Avery mostly are. Okay, their personalities are pretty similar just by the virtue of the DLC story being the same between games. They obviously have their different mannerisms and nuances, but every single scene with them plays out more or less identically. Their battles are pretty unique though, obviously having completely different teams. But also in their third battles, they get a distinct little advantage at the start, with Clara setting up a layer of toxic spikes, whereas Avery starts with a psychic terrain, also implying that Clara canonically carries Caltrops on her. As for their backstories though, that's where they really are completely different characters. Avery comes from a family of psychic gym leaders, but he was mocked and shunned for his weaker psychic abilities himself. Even while he was acting as a gym trainer, he'd start levitating anyone he had beat, letting that feeling of victory and superiority get into his head. And after getting kicked out for that, he wound up at the Master Dojo so he could train up and actually do it. It's really compelling. Meanwhile, Clara is just a lazy bum. She was an underground pop singer whose debut album only sold 8 copies. I mean, I still have mine, but... So to boost her popularity, she joined the Poison Gym in hopes of becoming a leader. But it was too hard, so she gave up and joined the dojo because she thought that would be easier. Yeah, no, as much as I love her, one of these characters has considerably more depth than the other. It almost feels like Avery was written first, with Clara tacked on just to add a version difference here. And hell, Galarian Slowpoke might even prove that, with the base form not even being a poison type yet. I still love you, Clara, I'm sorry for the slander. Oh, and also, tied to these 2 goobers, there's one singular piece of version-exclusive clothing in this game, with one of the students in the Master Dojo giving you either the Clara Forever shirt or the Avery Forever shirt. I bought the wrong fucking game. And I'm running out of ways to reword this. The Isle of Armor showcases yet another example of the weird level imbalance again, where this time all of the overworld encounters in Challenge Road, the Training Lowlands, and Pot Bottom Desert are just higher leveled in Sword for no reason. It's not even like a consistent increase across the 3 areas. The boost ranges from 3 levels to 6. And it doesn't even matter because after you beat Eternatus, everything gets set to level 60 anyway. Whatever, this is the last time they did anything like this anyway. Good. Well, that's it for Galar then. It's pretty cool having some of these characters swap out, but that's really all there is here. Wait, what's that? I forgot to mention Swordward and Chilbert swapping places in the post-game? No, I didn't. I just didn't want to talk about it. Now, as for the Sinnoh remakes, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I actually have nothing.
There's nothing.
There is literally nothing new compared to the original Diamond and Pearl. And literally all of those differences carry over since these are more or less the same games. I guess you can count there being some version-exclusive statues for your secret base in the Grand Underground purely because the Pokemon they're based on, being the legendaries in Ramanas Park, are also exclusives, and you unlock the statues for catching them. The battle backgrounds between Dialga and Palkia are pretty noticeably different, and like, for as BDSP are, they do have some pretty nice battle backs. Oh wait, I've got one! In the Pokemon Super Contest shows, which are fucking dog shit, by the way, when you hit a note perfectly in the stupid rhythm game section, it says Brilliant in Brilliant Diamond and Shining in Shining Pearl. Wow! Yes, when the EB Games employee asked me what version I wanted, this is why I chose Shining Pearl. Now for our final frontier, Scarlet and Violet, and we're going out with an While the differences in these games certainly seem massive, they really aren't. The most obvious one right off the bat is that between the games, your school switches out, with Scarlet having the Orange Naranja Academy and Violet having the Purple Uva Academy. But this change and everything tied to it is purely 100% aesthetic. Your outfit options are different between the games, with your school uniforms obviously being themed to, well, the school. And while a lot of the designs are unique, like they're not all just the basic texture and color swaps, it's still super limiting. Similarly, a handful of characters have slightly different designs to reflect these new uniforms too. What kind of mood am I in right now? Orange Arven or Purple Arven? We do also have the return of the UI changing accordingly, and that's nice. It's still not quite on the level of Black and White 2 here, being really minimal, just the borders in places like the bag menu. This is also the only example of a game having exclusive PC wallpapers, with Wallpaper 20 being themed around either Naranja or Uva Academy accordingly. There's also Koraidon and Miraidon, not even accounting for story stuff yet, actually. They'll act as your one and only mount throughout your entire journey, so it's important to take into consideration whether you want the bike or flesh almost bike before making your purchase, I guess. And last but not least, the story. Despite probably having the biggest differences between versions, maybe, even then that's kind of pushing it, they're still ultimately very similar. So for starters, both the Victory Road and Starfall Street storylines are literally one-to-one between the games. Nothing changes unless you want to count, like, the goddamn Koraidon model changing to Miraidon. Path of Legends, though? Yeah, no, still barely. The Titan that you wind up battling in Asado Desert is actually different between the games, rather appropriately being Great Tusk in Scarlet and Iron Treads in Violet. Depending on the game, the Professor and Arven's present parent, although present is a very strong word, will either be Sada or Turo. Dialogue obviously reflects this, and there will be points where they themselves talk to you. Yeah, that's it. Until The Way Home, the final arc of the game that finally makes the differences actually apparent. In Scarlet, Professor Sada wanted to open a gateway to the past, whereas Professor Turo wanted a gateway to the future. Wait, no, yeah, that's still like nothing. The final bosses of each game are unique, being either Sada or Turo themselves. I mean, it's the AI versions of them, but they're not in control right now, so like, you know what I mean. Their teams consist entirely of Paradox Pokemon from either version, so that's something. In certain spots around the region, you can find magazines describing some of the Paradox Pokemon, and they obviously swap out for the version you're in. Damn, these games actually didn't have that many differences either. Maybe the DLC will... No, these have, like, actually zero differences aside from the version-exclusive Pokemon. I guess it's worth noting that in the Indigo Disc, Jock can trade you a Gulpin, even though that's typically a Violet exclusive. So boom, another case of one version, this time Violet having two less exclusive Mons than the other? I guess there's the Crystal Pool cutscene, swapping Sada for Turo. But that's technically in the epilogue, so the DLC has already ended, so how about that? And, I guess those are all the mainline Pokemon games that have differences. The third versions, save Ultra Sun and Moon, aren't really comparable in that way. Legends Arceus and Legends ZA are just solitary titles. Damn. The currently upcoming Winds and Waves do have slightly different designs for the protagonists based on the games. Wow, this video's dated forever now. But time will have to tell if there are any truly remarkable differences between them. Out of all of the games here, I'd argue that the only ones that use the idea of two versions to their maximum effectiveness are Black 2 and White 2. And that's mainly just down to the fact that they have lots of exclusive content between them. Realistically, you could have just made them one game anyway. Black and White 1 kind of come close, but putting White Forest aside, there's still not that much that justifies the differences. And as for Alola, if you take away the whole time difference, which is admittedly pretty large, you're left with not much else. All of the rest of these games do not justify being split in two like this. Sure, it was at least somewhat acceptable back when the franchise was newer, But now, with stuff like, I don't know, Sword and Shield for example, you could so easily just have a single text choice in the game that lets you choose what quote-unquote version to go for. But I get it. Tradition and all. Oh, wait, shoot. I just realized I forgot one more version difference in X and Y. So on Route 8, there are some Rock Smash rocks, right? And when you break them, you might encounter a Pokemon. And these Pokemon are a different level between X and Y. Only in the Rock Smash encounters. Oh my god. So buying both was worth it!